Welcome on this winter edition of the World Ceilidhs. Um, let's open it. Let's go to the north of Finland. And there, even higher up north than the huge forests, there's at the edge of a forest on the north side. Well, it isn't even a town. It is just, let's say, 10, 15 houses. And in that house lives Lars with his family. And they have a good time together. They really, it's a loving home. It's just a bit of pity that there's no shops there. So if you want to do shoppings, you have to go with your sleigh through the forest. And there's this little village with a bar and a baker store and a butcher store and well, whatever you need, you can buy into the village. And now it's almost Christmas, and they still need to do the shoppings. Well, normally I would ask the audience, what kind of shoppings would you want to do? What would you want to have for dinner? Well, that is on Zoom here not a very easy thing to do. So let's say they want to have turkey because they missed Thanksgiving this year, and they want to have ice cream as dessert, even close to the North Pole. Ice cream is always nice as dessert. And they want to have soup, but also they want to have presents for under the tree and for into the socks. So I would ask one of the mothers in the audience, well, what would you like, Lars, to take home for the wife? And she would say, oh, I would love well, let's say a bracelet. And for the children, the son, he wants well, a horse, just a head on a stick, I don't know the word for it, but you get the picture. And for the daughter, well, she would love to have also a horse on a stick, because why would a gift for a lady be different than for a boy? So normally they have this sort of trunk on the backside of the sleigh, where you can put all the belongings, all the shoppings, all the whatever's in. But now the trunk was in repair. So Lars put a rain barrel on the sleigh. And then Spot goes in front of it, and Spot never was hit with a whip. But Lars couldn't help it. He loved to whip it just in the air like a chugga! Go on, Spot, here we go. And there they went. And they had those little sleigh bells on the side of the sleigh. And Spot really liked to go. And he was there going, and you heard all the bells like ching, 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 ching. Oh, they had a good time together. And the fresh snow, it smelled so, well, I don't know how you would describe the smell of snow, but the freshness in your nostrils, almost like a little metallic. You feel the health coming in through your airways. And he went into the forest in the morning. Well, he came into the town and he bought a turkey and he bought the ice cream and the bracelet and the two sticks on the horses and many more stuff. And then he went into the library. But in the library, there was this man. His name was Jim Kissane. And And Jim, well, he could yarn a story, and Lars couldn't help himself. He was just listening to Jim, and of course you don't know the story yet, so maybe we can ask here Jim to give us a little example of how a Jim could tell a story in that little village in the north of Finland. Jim.
Well, I cannot tell you anything about the north of Finland other than the fact that I understand that it can be a little bit chilly. But I guess I'm not surprised, because have you ever noticed in the month of December how the theme of love seems evident more so than in many months of the year? And I guess it makes sense. In many parts of the world, December is the coldest and darkest month of the year. And that leads us as humans to crave warmth and connection. And of course, that's an environment where love gets an opportunity to flourish. So I'd like to share with you one of those stories that was passed on to me, oh my gosh, almost 60 years ago by my mother, who heard this story from the pastor of her church when she was a young child at the beginning of the 20th century. And the scene is 1910, 114 years ago, and the train that had stopped at Harper's Ferry, West Virginia, had just taken on a new passenger, a young man named Curtis. And as he stepped off the cold platform where he had been chilled to the bone by the gusty winds that were sweeping up through the Shenandoah Valley into the Northeast, he relished the warmth of the cars that, although it was only a 5-car train, they were warm. And as he looked up and down both sides of the third car that he entered, all the seats were taken except for one. And these seats in these early Edison rail cars faced each other. And he looked at the empty seat and he stepped up and talked to the lady that was sitting opposite and said, "Would it be okay if I took this seat?" And the young woman, who had a tiny infant wrapped in a blue blanket held close to her, looked him up and down with kind of a disapproving frown on her face. And then with a wave of her hand said, "I suppose so." And Curtis eased himself into the seat opposite the lady with the child. Now, the train started up and there was a blistering storm that was blowing up through that valley. And as a train pulled out of Harper's Ferry, headed westbound toward Pittsburgh, the locomotive was straining against this fierce winter storm. The sparks coming off the steel wheels of the engine as it clawed, trying to get traction against the frozen rails. And as it picked up speed, the cars started their rocking back and forth, and the train was underway. And Curtis looked at the lady across from him, and she didn't seem happy at all. And she was staring up at the ceiling, staring everywhere except at him. And he attempted to engage her in conversation, but each attempt failed. And not wishing to be too forward, he waited a while. And you could tell the woman was tired, because momentarily she would nod off to sleep. And then when the train went over a turnout or a switch, the rocking of the car would jolt her back to an awakened state. And at each station stop, Roger, the conductor, would come through prior to arriving and would announce the name of the station. And after this had happened 4 or 5 times, the young woman looked up at Roger and said, "Conductor, I have to make sure that I don't miss my stop. Would you make sure that I'm awake so I get off?" And Roger looked at the woman and said, "Ma'am, you're scheduled to arrive at your station stop at 3:10 a.m. I will make sure that you're awakened on time." And that gave her a sense of peace. And the strain that you could see in her face started to melt away. After Roger continued going through the cars, Curtis leaned forward and said, "Miss, I also will make sure that I'm attentive to the time to make sure you don't make, the mistake of missing your stop also." And with that, her face lightened up even more. As the train continued its slow journey across the state of Pennsylvania, there was a very palpable sense that there was something on this woman's mind, and he wasn't exactly sure what it was. And he started to engage the woman in conversation. And yes, he could tell by her attire, she seemed to be from a more affluent family. She was dressed in finery, and she had an elegant hat and a beautiful scarf. And he guessed that she had been an educated woman, which wasn't all that common in those days. And he started a conversation with her. And yes, she had completed school and she had studied art. And she was fond of Shakespeare. And one of the favorite plays of Shakespeare that she felt drawn to was All's Well That Ends Well. And he thought, wow, this is a very interesting woman. I would like to know more about her. And eventually the two started a conversation. And he learned that she was on that train because she had lost her late husband several weeks before to a tragic accident. And after the accident, an aunt and uncle that lived in Western Pennsylvania had invited the woman and her child to come live with them. And she had been on a train since it began in Delaware, several states away. And so, yes, she was tired, but she was headed to an unknown destination, a mysterious journey yet to unfold in her life. And she said, the thing that really spoke to me the most about All's Well That Ends Well, and it speaks to me at this particular moment in my life because it talks about uncertainty. And she said there were 3 parts of that that really resonated with her. Love all, trust a few, do wrong to none. And Curtis was impressed because this is a woman who not only had upbringing, but she was being driven by a set of very important values. And after sharing that, she finally fell into a deep sleep. And even the rocking of the train as it went over switches and coming into upcoming stations didn't awaken her. Until shortly after 3 o'clock in the morning, the train began to slow down. And Curtis pulled out his pocket watch and looked at it. Oh, it's 3:02. This must be the stop that she needs to get off on. And he reached over and nudged her gently, and she woke up with a start. Says, "Miss, I believe your stop is coming up." Now, The stop that she had to get off on was called a whistle stop. There wasn't a station per se. Usually it was just a platform. Sometimes, just a post marking that stop. But in the letter of introduction with the tickets that she had been given, she was told that her aunt and uncle would be waiting there to pick her and the child up. And as the train drifted to a stop, Curtis said, "May I escort you off the train?" And with that, he picked up the mother and her child, led them back to the vestibule at the back of the car. And as the door opened up, the blistering cold wind from the storm stung at his face, and she wrapped her baby even closer, held it to her bosom as she departed into the foot-deep snow. And she turned around and cast a loving stare up at Curtis, and he thought, oh my gosh, this could be the start of something. And he made note of the station where she stopped off. He would have to follow up with her once he arrived in Pittsburgh. And then there was a jolt and the train began to move forward again. And Curtis went back to his seat, watching the woman and her child drift off into the dense evening snowfall. About 8 minutes later, the train started to slow again, and Roger came walking through the train, and he said, "Where's the woman with the baby?" And Curtis said, "Well, I helped her get off at the last stop." "That wasn't a stop. We had a difficulty with the engine. It had to be fixed. Where did she get off?" "Well, it was a few minutes back." He said, "Oh, dear God, you've sent this woman to her demise." And he immediately pulled the emergency stop and announced to all the other train crew what had happened. And the train started to reverse back to the place where they thought the woman had gotten off. And when it was in the area that they thought was where the woman departed, everybody left the train and started searching in earnest for the woman. But the blizzard had obliterated any evidence what direction she had gone in. There was no sign of civilization anywhere. And then they found the woman and her child underneath the boughs of a large pine tree. They were both frozen stiff. Now, it was a very somber ride from there all the way to Pittsburgh. And the one thought that Curtis had in the back of his mind was there were 3 parts of that Shakespeare tale. Love all, he had done that. Trust a few, she had not done that, or maybe she had. But do harm to none, well, that was on him. And it was that legacy that Curtis kept with him for the rest of his life.
And of course, Lars applauded and applauded till his hands were red. And he thought, well, I wish I had a mother that told me stories like that. And it took a few minutes, and then he dared to look around again. And suddenly he said, "Katty, I thought you were in Oman. What the beep are you doing here?" And well, we all know when Katty starts talking, she starts talking. Well, for the people that don't know that yet, maybe Katty could give a little example.
An example of talking? Yeah. Today was my first day at the new term teaching the pilots at the Aviation Academy. So I'm toast. I'm exhausted. It's so cool to be doing this, though. The last time I had a regular gig with good pay was January 2020. And that's, what is that? Is that 4 years ago? Jeez, that's a long time. That's a long time. So I'm trying to make sure I get it right. But I love listening to Ross's stories about being Santa Claus. Back in Texas, it was Carl Anderson that made us happy every year, and he passed away last year. So all my friends have been exchanging pictures of him, and how much they remember and how much they loved him. And uh, the only thing that every time it's Christmas time, I always remember being asked to be the MC at the Meyerson Symphony Hall in Dallas, and having such a great time doing that gig. And at the very end, it was my job as the MC to call Santa Claus to come from the back of the auditorium up to the front onto the stage, encouraging the clapping the entire way. And when Santa Claus got up there, how he stuck his two arms out to those gloved hands and that red jacket and the big white beard to come and embrace me. I'm not an embraceable person. Oh, geez. Even in church, when they ask, can you all give each other the sign of peace? I'm like, don't touch me. And I was social distancing a long time before COVID ever came along. But there's Santa Claus on stage with me, and he's going, just coming at me for the big hug. And I was like, ah, so I didn't have any choice except to hug him, but he didn't know, and neither did I, that all of the sequins on my beautiful multi-rainbow colored shirt with all the thousands of sequins of different colors were to attach themselves to his beard. And when he attempted to step away from me after the embrace, we sort of had a post-embrace. We realized he was firmly entangled. His beard was firmly entangled in my bosom. And so we had to waltz from center stage, off stage, left, and then untangle me enough so that I could get back to the microphone again to introduce the next act. That's all I have to say about that, except I won't see you all again until the new year, and Happy New Year, and cross your fingers for me that things will go well teaching that all those nice pilots. And if you ever fly with Oman Air and you hear them say, welcome aboard Oman Air. We have an hour to Doha, where the weather is very nice and warm. Welcome. My name is Abdullah Al-Balushi. Just know that I was the one that coached him on that. That's all.
And hearing this, of course, Lars said, holding his beard, Kathy, come here. And of course, Kathy didn't like to hug a lot, but when she saw Lars, she just couldn't help herself, and she fell for it. And they hugged, and they hugged, and it became later and later because Kathy couldn't stop hugging no more. Like all the hugs she didn't give before had to come out on Lars. And it became later and later. And just when Lars was walking back to Spot to take on his journey home, he met Norman. And Norman, well, usually they saw a lot of Norman. But lately Norman had gone to a trip to Scotland and had been offline and off contact with everybody for at least 3 months. And now Lars said, oh, and now it's winter, and I'm really done hugging now. So Norman, I'm sorry, I'm not gonna hug you now, but I still like it a lot to see you again. How are you? And did you encounter any new winter stories? And Norman said, well, let's hear.
Let's hear. What I encountered was a river, the River Tweed. And I earlier this year, I made a rash wish of the universe, and sometimes the universe pays attention. I wanted away from the city. I wandered away from this back alley, which you cannot see, but it's all concrete and gloom and traffic, etc. And the answer the universe gave was, "Well, you have a chance to stay in a place called Walkerburn, in the Scottish borders, in a house at the end of a long street, and a short walk away is the River Tweed, and there you can sit by the river and watch it go by as long as you want for 3 months." There was other things involved. I went to festivals. Michael Kieran's was through a ceilidh. Things happened, but there was always the river to come to. And while I was there, my friend Harriet, who lived in British Columbia, and she was very, very ill with Alzheimer's. And I was to go, and we planned the trip. This is about your story, by the way. It has hugs at the end of it, okay? And the beginning, the middle, and the end. So this is a story which I have to tell. It was a full moon by coincidence. And when I got the news that Harriet, whom I was supposed to go visit in June, planned in June, had passed away suddenly, very suddenly. And so my visit in October was a visit to her graveside. But when I heard that news back in Scotland, by the River Tweed, I walked down to the river. It's easy to find because it's the sound of the rapids. The river was up, was easy to follow. There was a full moon that night, and by the light of the moon and the sound of the river, I followed that sound, and I came down to the river, and I played a tune for Harriet. And I thought of this story which I'm about to tell. I composed it for Harriet many years ago. It's a true story. If you want to know what truth is in the story, it doesn't have a lot in the line of facts. So there's a heck of as much truth as I could put into it. Harriet loved hugs. And to get a Harriet hug was to get a gift that lasted a lifetime. She, as a little child, she hugged everything. She hugged the postman, the postwoman, if there was one. She hugged the dogs. She hugged the trees. She hugged the fireman who put out a fire down the street. She even hugged the fire hydrant that gave the water to put out the fire. Harriet loved giving hugs and receiving them. And one time she was with a friend, and the friend was about to go on a journey around the world. And so Harriet, of course, saying goodbye, gave her a great, big, huge, enormous hug. And that hug stayed with that woman and journeyed around the world. It went to places in Egypt. It went to places in Oman and in Finland, and places like Marrakesh. That hug traveled, and it gathered memories all along the way. That hug traveled for many years until at last, one day, that woman decided to go back home. And she went back to her favorite place in the park. And then she went to a tree. And there was the tree. She gave it a hug, of course. Now, over those years, Harriet had been traveling too. She went to many places. She traveled to Massachusetts. She traveled to British Columbia. She traveled to places where she found memories and gave memories, and memories were scattered around like the leaves that were flying from that tree in the autumn winds. And so there she stood underneath that autumn tree, that maple tree of red and yellow and green and gold and scarlet, all the colors of the rainbow. And the wind blew gently. And as it blew gently, the leaves fell. And Harriet danced among those leaves. She danced among the leaves, and each leaf was a memory of the hug's journey. And as each leaf touched her, she got these memories of love, found, sorrowed, healed, and traveled from country to country. And each one was a memory. And at last, the wind died down. And then when they came back, they found Harriet underneath a tree. She was sitting there, and she was asleep. She was asleep with a sleep that lasted forever. But she left behind so many wonderful memories that we will never forget. Thank you for listening. I'm still working on that story, but thank you for listening.
Well, thank you for telling, said Lars. And then Wendy said to Lars, "Hey, Lars, didn't you realize that it was already dark outside? You have to go all the way through the forest with Spot and your shoppings to your children and your wife. You nutter, it's wolf season." So Lars went outside to the sleigh and to Spot, and he petted he petted the animal. He was his friend, and there they went, and there he went with the whip again. Chaka! Come on, Spot! And off they went. Ching, 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 ching. And of course, Zoom picks up the ching better than the flutes. So ching, 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 ching. There they went. And when they were about halfway the forest, it just started with one little howl. Come on, Spot, come on. You have to go faster. You have to go faster, because I don't want you to be the next shawarma for the wolves. Come on, Jagga! And off he went. And while they were on full speed, suddenly, on the path through the forest, there was this old lady with a stick walking over the path. And while hurrying alongside, while passing her, Lars thought, she must be crazy to walk here in wolf season. She must be nuts. And about 3 miles further on the road, he said, "Ho, come on, stop, Spot, stop. We cannot celebrate Christmas and let that woman be eaten." So he turned the sled and he went back to the old lady. And he turned again, and the old lady slowly climbed onto the sleigh. "Oh, okay. Yes, hurry up, please. Hurry up. Yes. Come. Nothing ever went better with rushing. Yes, I know, but please come on now. yes. Oh, those youngsters nowadays. I'm almost sitting. Oh God, and ching, 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 ching. And there they went again. And they went. And Lars asked, so why are you here in the middle of the forest? Well, I'm going to my daughter. She lives all the way up north. You know, at the rim of this forest, there's this little group of houses, but then you have to walk on for about 10 miles. There was a house there. Does your daughter know that you're coming? No, it is a surprise. Oh, what a stupid woman. What a stupid woman. We still have to go a long way, right? Yes, and in the back you still heard one wolf, but it got multiplied. 2 wolves, 3 wolves, 4 wolves. There was a whole pack of wolves coming up. And the wolves came closer and closer and closer and closer and closer. And there they were. While holding the horse with one hand, he grabbed into the rain barrel. I don't know what it is. And he threw it. It was the turkey. And the wolves were eating. And there was a little more distance now. But soon the wolves came again. And he grabbed the bracelet. They just left it there and kept on coming, and they were jumping to the sleigh. So he grabbed again. It was the ice cream. Well, the wolves had a little good time with it, and soon the whole barrel was empty. Even the little horses on sticks, everything was there. Now there was nothing but the lady and Lars and the empty rain barrel. And Lars thought, well, her daughter doesn't even know that she's here. I mean, we would not have this trouble if she was not walking through the forest with wolves. Let's just... But then there was this little voice in his head telling him that he could not celebrate Christmas after throwing an old lady in front of the wolves. So he threw off the rain barrel and he gave the leash to the old lady, and I said, "You're just right off here. Follow this road, and you will come to this little settlement." And then he jumped off, and he climbed. He took the rain barrel upside down over his head, and he took shelter there. Well, in the little settlement, his wife was already looking to see if her husband was coming up. And when she hears this little ching, 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 she's really happy again. There's Lars. But there was this strange lady. And she bumped her head, so she was in coma. And when she was woken up, she told about Lars and the rain barrel, and the whole all the settlers went there to save Lars. And then it was time for Christmas, and they had a wonderful Christmas dinner with lentils. And as a Christmas gift, they could postpone doing the dishes for the next morning. But they were so happy that they were together. And then when it was time for the children to go to bed, Lars was sitting on the corner of their beds, one of their beds. And his daughter said, "Tell me again about that crazy old lady." And And then Lars told the story about Marike. And well, maybe Marike, you can tell it yourself, maybe a bit better.
Oh, those poor children. They get a horrific story. Well, Lars asked the children what kind of story they wanted to hear. And he allowed them to get out of their bed and go to the Christmas tree. Because Lars had a very special Christmas tree in his house. It was a storyteller's Christmas tree. I'm going to try to show you what it looked like. Let's see. He could tell a story about, where is he? What is the animal in English? I don't know the word. The eland. The reindeer.
Reindeer.
The reindeer with the skis. Or he could tell them a story about all the richness of the caves of Aladdin, or the story of the little house in the woods in the snow. But the children said no, they didn't want to hear these stories. So I'm going to turn a little, see if I can show you. He asked them if they wanted to have a story about a stolen Fabergé egg, but no, they didn't want that. But finally, they told him they wanted a story about the food. And he said, well, it's a story not for children, it's a story for grown-ups. So it's this food, and even there, I don't know if you can see it, there's turkey over there. But the children really wanted to hear the story about the food. And Lars told them, you're gonna get nightmares, but no, they really wanted it. So he told them. And this was a story the old lady told him when they were in the sleigh, fleeing for the wolves that were howling behind them. And the old lady told him, you do not need to fear death. Really, there's no worry. I know a story about that. There was a lady who died on Christmas Day. She didn't notice it. She just transferred from one table, it seemed like, to another table, to a big room. And well, it looked very merry there. There was a Christmas tree, there was a fire, there were lots and lots of people sitting on the tables, there was music. It was really richly decorated. It really was a Christmas atmosphere. But then when she looked, she saw that every person had the cutlery attached to their hands. So on the right hand, there was a knife, and it was really, really long. And on the left hand, some had a fork, some had a spoon, but also it was really, really, really long. And everybody tried to eat. They tried to get some food and put it in their mouth, but because the cutlery was so long, they couldn't reach their mouth. So everybody was angry and everybody was sad, and it was a really horrific atmosphere there. That was hell. And she really was confused, standing there at the top of the table and looking around what was happening there. And then she heard a voice that said, you can choose. This is hell. And I can also show you the other side. So she went with the old man to another room. It also was a very long room, and it looked almost the same. There was a Christmas tree, there was a fire, it was really richly decorated, it smelled very good, there were long tables, there were lots of people, music was beautiful. And also here, the people had really long hands with knives on the right, and really long hands with forks or spoons on the left. But here, there was laughter, there was happiness. And here everybody was taking food from a plate and offering it to someone else. Feeding each other, asking, what do you want to have? I can get it to you. And then she knew what to choose. And she had a very, very happy Christmas. So that was the story of the old lady, and then from Lars to the children. And although you might think they had a nightmare about it, they didn't. The day after, they created these long spoons and long knives, and they had really a great Christmas together.
And well, those days, they celebrated a Boxing Day and a second Christmas Day and a third Christmas Day. But well, let's go back to that little village on the other side of the forest. It was evening, and everyone was inside. And everyone was having a wonderful Christmas night together, and the wood was burning in the hearth, and they all had their warm wine with spices and a great time. But there was one person who was not indoors. He was a rather old man, and he walked through the freshly fallen snow, and it was ankle deep. And behind him was this little brown dog. He had to lift his paws pretty high to walk through the snow. Luckily, the old man found a barn, and okay, the wind went right through it, and the snow fell through the roof because there was a lot of tiles missing there, but he found himself a corner, and there was some dry straw, and in that corner the wind didn't come through, and he was sitting there, and he was hiding himself into his too big coat. And then from his pocket, he picked up a slice of bread, well, a double slice, and there was even some meat in between. And the dog had followed him and was sitting beside him. Hi, doggy. Nice that you followed me. Now I'm not alone. You want half my bread, right? And of course, the dog wanted half his bread. So he tore it in two, gave the dog half, and together they chewed on the bread, well, the rather old bread, and had a wonderful time just enjoying digesting the food. And he thought back, as we all do this last month of the year, and he remembered how he once did a winter concert at school. And how Bethany was there. And he forgot how the story went exactly, but while he was talking about it to the dog, it came back in mind. Oh, Bethany, while you're here, maybe you can tell that better than I can.
I'll give it a try. I'll start with a poem. Remember, remember the 3rd of December for ballads and myths and tales. Though the wind it may chill us, and I am full of bacillus, by St. Nicholas' Day I'll be happy and hale. Or so I hope. I may mute now and then for a sneeze or a cough, but let's see. There is a Christmas carol that I cannot sing, I cannot hear being sung, especially by a choir of sweet-voiced children, without weeping. It's just so sweet. It's so poignant. It's a French, not a song you would hear in church. It's more of a folk carol. It's called Bring a Torch, Jeanette Isabella, and it is so sentimental that it makes me cry. Well, when my son was 11 years old, his school was having a winter music concert. And we knew that he was in 2 choirs because he'd been practicing his songs all over the house. And so the night we went, we were all excited to hear him sing. So we sat in the gymnasium, which is where winter choirs or winter concerts are heard in Canada. And we looked through our program. And what do, right? You look at your program, you're looking for where your child is. And there he is, and there he is, right? And then you look for, oh, where are the smallest children? Where will the kindergarten children be singing? And you find them. You're looking for them because in your head, you're taking bets of how many of them are going to fall off the risers. And they never disappoint. And as I'm looking through the program, I look at the very last entry and I see that the year 5 children, the grade 5 children, will be singing, Oh No. Bring a torch, Jeanette Isabella, the song that makes me cry. And because it's the last song, the lights will come up in the gym and everyone will say, why is Dominic's mummy making all those crying noises? And so I prepare myself. I turn to my husband and I get some Kleenex from him. He always has extra Kleenex. That is why I married him. And I put it in my pocket and I settle in. And each year has their own choir. And so my son's grade 6 choir comes and they sing, and always wonderful, of course. And then there's a few skits, and then the kindergarten children come, and the 3 of them fall off the risers. And then my son is in another choir. It is for the older children, grades 4, 5, and 6. And when all the children come on stage, they're all in a clump. But I notice that one boy is standing about a meter away from the others, and he's come on a bit later, and he has an adult with him. And the adult sits on the stage and is keeping an eye on him. And I thought, oh, that is odd. And then I remember my son said, Mom, there is a boy in our special older children's choir. He's not in my year, but he's in the choir. And he has some behavioral problems, but oh, Mama, he can sing. He's the loudest. He's the clearest. And when he sings, the choir teacher says, oh, children, can you all sing as well as Zach can sing? And then he's very proud. And I thought, oh, bless that teacher. There are some music teachers that would say, I do not want a boy like Zach in my choir, but she's realized he's got a skill. He's got a talent. This is where he can shine in front of his peers. And so not only is he probably in his class choir, but he's in the older children's choir. Good for her. What a good teacher. Well, they start to sing. And my son has not been exaggerating. Zach is perhaps the only one on stage that is pitch perfect. He pronounces perfectly, and he's the loudest thing on stage. His voice is like the voice of an angel. I am enthralled. I find my ears tuning in just to hear Zach's voice, which is rather not very good parenting. I should be listening for my son, right? But oh, Zach, he's just so wonderful. And the concert continues, and then there is a special choir. I think it's for the ones the teachers have personally invited because there's lots of harmony. And there's only about 12 of them in this choir, and Zach is back again. And again, I am enraptured by the sound of this boy's voice. And the evening progresses, and finally, we come to the very last song. Bring a torch, Jeanette Isabella. And it occurs to me, this boy, Zach, this is his year's choir. This is his class choir. Not only will this wonderful song be sung that will make me cry, but Zach will be doing the singing. I am toast. It's useless. I had to get my tissues ready to weep. And then the children come on stage, but Zach is not with them. And all the children are looking off stage, and some of them are giggling. And the teacher is going. So obviously, Zach is done. He does not want to go on stage. And I think of it, and really, his teachers, his parents could have predicted this. because Christmas concert, winter concert nights, they're a time of stress. So these children, and Zach has been at school all day, and then you rush home and you have to eat a quick supper at a time you're not used to. And then you have to put on special fancy clothes that maybe they don't make you feel comfortable. And then poor Zach has had to sing once and twice in front of a whole gymnasium full of people. And now, at the very end of the evening, they're asking him to come back and perform, and he is over it. He's done. But finally, they get him on stage, and he's like this. And the teacher, his aide, who's with him, is kind of like this, ready to grab him for whatever's going to happen. And the opening bars, the introduction comes, and the children begin to sing. And this is when I realize that not only is Zach pitch perfect and the loudest thing on stage, but he is actually very witty, and he is very good at coming up with alternate lyrics at the spur of the moment. So this is what Zach sings. And remember, he's the loudest, so we can hear him. He sings, I don't want to be in this choir. I don't even like this song. I just want to go home and watch TV. I do not like the baby Jesus bash, bash, bash on the baby Jesus bash, bash. And they haul him off stage. And I did cry that year hearing this song, but I was crying with laughter. Thank you. Yikes.
Thank you so much.
So every year now when we sing that song around the piano, we have to sing the Zach version to stop me from crying.
Can't imagine. Hey, Markie's gone. That is weird. Well, thank you, Bethany. And the dog looked up to the man. And it was almost like he was smiling too. And the man thought, yeah, that is right. When I was a youngster, I wasn't allowed to sing along if the class was singing. My teachers always said, okay, Marin, find your drawing stuff because we are gonna sing. Because I was an enthusiast singer as I am now, but I didn't understand nothing about measurement or pitch, but I was loud. I could do loud. I could not do pianissimo. So, and if it would have helped me, if I would have been a wonderful painter or drawing artist, it would have been okay, but I never came any further than a matchstick man. I can't even make a matchstick woman. But now the old man was sitting there and he thought about an old Christmas tale he knew about a famous busker, a street singer. He was not even a good singer. Actually, like Joe Cocker, his voice was like he was housing at least 10 frogs inside doing their winter sleep. And he couldn't even sing a whole song. He could just do one chorus. It was a bit like, I will enter it in the chat. Let me see, for everyone. It was a bit like that. What he could sing was, I love you, love, with all my pounding heart. I love you, love, like I love the sun, the moon, and the blue sky above. I love you, love. And everyone who heard him singing that, even if they would be, for instance, a Catherine, they could not help themselves. They would grab the first person that came close to them, and they had to turn to the other. They had to hug and look each other in the eye and start singing along. It was like magic. So on every village square, on every city square, in all the parks where the singer was, everyone started hugging and loving each other. And then one day the king heard about it. And well, as many kings, he was not really a kind and nice and patient person. So in his megalomaniac voice, which I will not do because I'm not an actor, I'm a storyteller, he yelled to everyone in the palace and he asked them why no one ever talked about that singer with him. And now it was December, and he demanded that the singer would come to the palace to sing for him. Well, that singer lived in a little woodcutter's house in a forest with his wife and his son and his little brown doggy. And this year he had promised them, I really promise, I will be here with Christmas. And now the courier of the king came halfway December and demanding him to be in the palace. Refusal, it was just not accepted. He had to go. But he promised, I will be back with Christmas. I will be back. I promise. And then they went to the palace. And he sang the song for the king. And all the personnel in the palace started hugging each other. And the king started to hug one of the servants. And the servant hugged him back. And actually, the king liked it. The king thought, it is actually, how can Catherine think that it's not nice to hug? But the king thought, well, if I ever meet Catherine, I will sing this song, and it will happen. It will happen. And for the first time in years, the king got a good mood. And he said to the singer, come on, I want to come with you to the city. And at first, when he walked out of the palace, everyone was giving bows and looked very politely to the king. And then they went to the square, and the singer started to sing, I love you, love, with all my pounding heart. I love you, love, like I love the moon, the stars, and the blue sky above. I love you, love. And the king was walking through the audience, and everyone hugged each other and hugged the king. And the king had never been more happy in his life. Can you please stay here till next year? No, I'm sorry, Your Majesty. I know it is a wonderful honor, but I promised my wife and my son and my little brown dog that I would be home with Christmas. I will give you my robe, the robe of the king for you if you stay. I'm sorry, Your Majesty. I made a promise. What if you stay here till the 30th of December? Then you can be at home with New Year's Eve. I'm sorry, Your Majesty. I will give you my royal horse. I'm sorry, Your Majesty. And the day before Christmas, the singer went back. But it was as it should be in Wintertail's evening. It was windy. It was stormy. And the clouds didn't know whether to drop hail or rain or ice. They threw out everything at the same time. And it was so cold. And it was so dark. It was those years before, yes, they were really there. There was a time we didn't have any streetlights, especially not in forests. And of course he got lost. How could we ever have a Christmas story if he would not be lost? And it was so cold. And he went on and he went on. The path was gone. He was just going straight through the bushes. And his face was open because of the thorns of the brambush and then when all of his stamina was gone, he looked up to the pitch dark sky. And with his last breath, he sang, I love you, love, with all my pounding heart. I love you, love, like I love the moon, the stars, and the blue sky above. I love you, love. And then, in that blackness, came a door made of light. And there came a silhouette in that door. And he heard a dog bark. And then the silhouette approached him. It was his wife. He had found his way all the way home, and his wife was in the door opening and walking towards him, saving him from the snow and the ice. And the little brown dog, oh, he was so happy, and he licked and he licked and he licked and he licked him all the way warm. And no matter that the singer didn't like to hug, because he only liked other people to hug, but now he let himself be hugged by the little doggy. And even though it was a male dog, he called it Catty, and Catty licked his face where you could touch it. Okay, I'm derailing here a bit. And they had a wonderful Christmas. And this is what the old man in the barn said to the dog. And then suddenly, that little brown dog in the barn, well, he said, "Ruff," which was expected. But then he started to speak. And he said, I am the spirit of Christmas. And I have been the spirit of Christmas for almost 2,000 years now. You took me with you. You gave me half your food. You gave me stories, and you gave me a wonderful Christmas time. Maybe the best Christmas time I ever had for the last 2,000 and something years. You can wish for whatever you want, and I make sure you get it. So what will be your wish? And the man scratched his head and he said, life is such a wonderful adventure. Whatever could I get that is better than the adventure itself? I love to have you as my company. I trust you completely. Even though someone's mother said, never trust too many, I trust you. What I would want a dog just like you are. And the ghost of Christmas, well, he thought to himself, I've been a Christmas ghost for 2 millennia now. Actually, life of a little brown dog might actually be preferable, because I really do have an impact on this man just by being me. So he said, okay, I will no longer be the ghost of Christmas. I will now be your little brown dog. And that were the last words he spoke. And then he said, "Roof!" And somehow the old man thought, oh, yes, you're right. Yes, we didn't ask Ross for a story. And Ross, well, he is sort of a spirit of Christmas too, yeah? Let's ask Ross if he has a story to tell. Is that okay? And the dog said, "Roof!"
Oh boy. I'm trying to shut my phone off here. It keeps binging at me. Well, it won't cooperate. So we'll turn it off. Okay. Hello there. Greetings. You know, I've been listening to all these seasonal stories and happy tales and all that, but you know, I'm just an old Florida storyteller, so I'm going to fall back on a Florida story, and it's a story that we'll have to go back a ways. We'll start rolling that clock back, and we'll just keep rolling it and rolling it and rolling it until we get back to 1845. And then we'll slip it back one more year, 1840, 1854. The American Civil War was still raging. Atlanta had fallen after the siege. General Sherman and his troops had started their march to the sea, burning fields and barns and killing pigs. As he had declared in an interview with a newspaperman, "We'll stop the South from rising again for 100 years." That was his intent, and that was what he did. And as he continued his march to the sea, and as the war moved inevitably towards its end, the Confederacy crumbled. It wasn't hard to see what was going on. Florida had been the great provider, the beef basket for the Confederacy. It had sent cattle. It had sent salt from the salt works north to the Confederate troops throughout the war, making a few Floridians quite wealthy, but in the course of the battle. As the war wound down, the entire west coast of Florida was completely controlled and blockaded by the Union Navy. Key West at the far south end had always been held by the Union. Jacksonville had been held by the Union, which was understandable since only about 40 to 45% of the people of Florida wanted to join the Confederacy anyway. And by those late days of the war, very few did, just the fanaticals that held to the Confederacy to the end. There were dark days in Florida. And as the year began to wind down, following the fall of Atlanta in October, Florida felt cannon fire on its west coast, the Gulf Coast, from blockading ships that shelled with cannonballs Tampa from Tampa Bay. One ball landed in a cemetery now located on the northeast edge of downtown, then located in the countryside just out of town. That cemetery where now lay Confederate troops in a row with marked graves. Facing the other way, Union troops disappearing over the centuries under marked graves. Raiding parties from the ships destroyed the salt works, but were driven away by Confederate cavalry, still fighting hard. Tampa was never occupied. Well, briefly, but then chased away. Meanwhile, on the East Coast, the area totally under the control of the Union Army for most of the war. From St. Augustine, where the Spanish had landed and created the first colonial village in the North Americas, through Jacksonville was completely Union territory, and for miles in from the Atlantic. And so when Colonel, a by-the-book man, Colonel Henry Noble of the 17th Connecticut Infantry, was called to Jacksonville to participate in a court-martial, a distinguished colonel, he had to ride with him a young lieutenant from the colored troops. White officer, of course. And another officer, a captain, Henry Noble, of the 17th Connecticut Infantry, who had completed his enlistment and who, currying and combing and washing and preparing his beautiful white stallion horse that had been given to him as a gift by his father, since Union officers had their own mounts, prepared to make the trip with him as he worked his way north to go back home to Ohio. And they departed St. Augustine. They rode over that trail that runs from Augustine to Jacksonville, right along the coast of the Atlantic. The fabulous view to the east, the water, the clouds, the sun. And of course, it was even comfortable that time of the year wearing those wool blue suits with 13 brass buttons and their clanking swords at their side, handling the leather of the bridles and the squeaking on the saddles at times. They chatted and enjoyed themselves because the young captain, of course, was on his way home. He was delighted he would never face war anymore. The colonel was happy, and even the young lieutenant was delighted because they knew the war was rapidly drawing to a close. It was inevitable now that Sherman was marching to the sea. Even in those days when news flashes took days to go from Atlanta or the coast or DC to Florida, for officers and men from intelligence, and weeks for the common folk. But as they rode along that sandy trail, clipping and clopping and enjoying themselves, telling jokes and remembering the girls and the days and the drinks and the troops that they had all known. Suddenly, in a clump of trees that blew hard from the wind of the Atlantic, oak trees grew almost up to the shore. It wasn't just the palm scrubs. In front of them, there appeared two Confederate soldiers, rifles up at the ready, demanding their surrender. They thought, their minds raced. They looked left, right, and behind. And there was another Confederate soldier with another long arm directed toward them. They had no choice but to surrender or be killed. It was a dark day for these three. The war almost over, and then to face the idea of heading into a Confederate prisoner of war camp, where death would probably be imminent. The two Confederates at the front approached them, grabbed the reins of their horses, ordered them to dismount, which they did. They began talking because in those days it was different than today. They were all Americans. It was a war of brother against brother, cousin to cousin. The language was common. The weather was pleasant. They began to talk. And it was revealed that the young captain had finished his enlistment. He was simply headed home to Ohio. The three Confederates put their heads together. They took the by-the-book colonel and his crisp uniform prisoner. They took the commander of the colored troops. God only knows what happened to him, even though he was a white commanding lieutenant. And that beautiful white stallion became a prisoner of the Confederates. Who knows, perhaps he was one of those who founded the great herds of white stallions that roamed the horse ranches of Central Florida in the years that followed. And so it was that the good captain set off on foot, finally reaching his home in Ohio. And that was a gift from three rebels on Christmas Eve of 18.
And that's what happens if you ask Father Christmas to tell a story. Then it could be a story from a couple of days, a couple of years ago. Well, thank you, Raz. The old man and the dog had fallen asleep in the barn, but next morning they woke up. And the weather had improved tremendously. The man looked at the dog and said, "Well, what do you think? Is it time to go?" And the dog jumped up and he took the cane of the old man and walked to the man again. He gave the man the cane. And the man said, "Wow, you're a little helper. That is nice. I thought I only found a new friend." And then while he stood up, it took a while, he thought by himself, would that be a wonderful theme for another World Ceilidh? Little helpers or helpers. And he said, yeah, let's do that in January. Let's come back here and make helpers the theme of the month. Thank you, Doc. And that was the end of this official winter episode of the World Ceilidh.